Unfortunately, here is the Sony PS-LX520 turntable. This was that linear tracking turntable that I made the video about repairing the action of the linear tracking arm so it would successfully track the record. Well, it was playing so beautifully with its new cartridge and everything, and then one day I went to turn it on and it was sick. I got a power light, had the record size detection light back there, but there was no response from the front control panel whatsoever. There weren't even any lights on, and the platter was kind of twitching and turning very slowly. So I popped the bottom off of the unit, and I decided to have a look. I was really expecting that some hard-to-find circuit or something like that had gone up in smoke on the poor old turntable, but I didn't find anything distressed. And there's a couple of major circuit boards in here. There's the control loop in and out deck, which would probably go to other Sony stereo equipment. There's the audio board. There's the table motor board. That's actually a stepping motor there. There's the logic board right here, and then there is the servo board, which controls the platter motor as well as the action of the linear tracking motor. It's also got a power supply on it that goes from this transformer back here and makes several voltages. And basically what's on here, there are two filter capacitors, both of them 1000 microfarad 25 volt Nichicon capacitors. And one of them appears to be working properly. This one over here seems to do just exactly what it should. Charges up to about 16 volts. This other one, on the other hand, I don't think it's working properly because it discharges extremely quickly after power off, and it never gets much beyond maybe 14 volts or so, and I think it ought to have 16 volts on it as well. The other thing that's missing, the first test that I ran before looking at those capacitors, there's a number of voltages coming into the control and logic board here. There's a positive 15 volts, there's a negative 15 volts, there's a negative 6 volts, and there's a positive 6 volts. Well, as it turns out, I've got every voltage except the positive 6 volts. And my guess is that's why the controls are dead to the world, because they depend on that positive 6 volt power supply in order to work properly. So I'm definitely thinking that this is a power supply problem, and as such, I'm going to go ahead and replace those two filter capacitors, the big ones there at the bottom, with these new ones. Now, they're not quite the same size, but there looks to be room inside this turntable to accommodate these. They are the same capacitance and the same voltage, so they're just larger physically. No electrical difference as far as I can tell. And I also invested in a copy of the service manual. Now, sometimes service manuals for stereo equipment are hard to come by, and this was definitely no exception. I didn't find any originals being offered for sale anywhere. But what I do know of, there's this business by the name of stereomanuals.com, which sells owner's manuals, service manuals, advertising literature, basically everything you could want for mostly older stereos, but some newer audio equipment and stereo equipment as well. And I paid them a little bit of money for this, about $20 shipped. It's definitely a reproduction, but it's been very nicely done. I'll set this on a flat surface here so you can actually see what's in here. But it's been very nicely reproduced. It's very readable. The various and sundry, the block diagram of the unit, assemblies, stuff like that, parts listings, diagram of the foil in the circuit board, which folds out so you can read the whole thing. So if push comes to shove, and maybe it will, because I just don't quite believe that it's as simple as one bad capacitor causing problems, although I'd like to hope, I can really go through this thing and debug it and see what's going on, and hopefully I can get it to go again, because while it worked, it was truly an exceptional sounding turntable, and I really liked the way it worked, the fact that it was fully automatic and it could repeat things and stuff like that. Anyway, if any of you are looking for stereo manuals, I would highly recommend the stereomanuals.com website. I say that as nothing more than a satisfied customer, because I have purchased at least one other manual from them over the years. And although they're kind of busy people, They did an excellent job on the reproduction as well, and their prices are pretty reasonable if you've got a vintage piece of stereo equipment that you're trying to fix. Here's part 2 of the Sony PS-LX520 Turntable saga. If you hadn't watched part 1, basically what happened is I went to use this thing, and all of a sudden I discovered that the logic controls for the transport were completely dead, and the turntable platter itself would kind of move on its own at a very low rate of speed. Well, I thought that replacing those 2 capacitors would fix the problem. I didn't feel they were behaving properly. But in reality, I misunderstood what the problem the circuit was trying to tell me about really was. There are some components in common that are used in the circuits involving these capacitors, and one of those components is an inrush limiting resistor, which basically soft starts whenever power is applied. Instead of power just going wham right through the circuit, the limiting resistor gradually lets the energy go through the circuit, hopefully preventing damage to some more sensitive component. Well, Sony opted to protect these circuits with a little thing known as an IC protector. And it looks deceptively like a little tiny transistor. There are 2 of them. Well, I got to looking at the schematic, and I got to realizing that this second cap was never discharging into the circuit. And if I had paid more attention to that, I would have figured out the problem much more quickly. This second little IC protector down here, for some reason or another, it opened up. Now what I have to figure out is why it opened up. Did it open up for some legitimate reason? Because there was really a problem within the turntable circuitry that necessitated its failure? Or did it just open up after so many years of power being turned on, inrush hitting it, and it finally quit of fatigue? It is 23 years old, after all, according to the date codes in this unit. Well, right now, I've got it shorted with this meter lead. And you shouldn't do something like this unless you're really very sure of what you're doing. Because if you're not absolutely sure of what you're doing, that IC protector is there to keep the magic smoke inside your integrated circuits. They tend not to work so well once you let the magic smoke out of them. So if you're not sure, don't jumper across any kind of a fuse ever. I was pretty sure that this part failed of fatigue, and now that I've shorted across it, I think I can say that with a great deal of safety. It's upside down right now, so it's not too happy, and I dare say that trying to operate it in this condition is not good, but the front panel logic is once again responsive, and I have a feeling that if I were to replace that little circuit protector, which I will do, that this thing would be restored back to perfect health. But this was definitely a case where I jumped to conclusions thinking that just because a set of capacitors was old, they were bad, and that wasn't necessarily a valid conclusion to jump to. So now I know that I need to go in here and I need to order one of these little circuit protectors, put it in place, button this thing back up, and then it should be perfectly happy to play records once again for many years to come. Anyway, I hope you found this video useful. When next I get to this, I've got to figure out where I can order the circuit protectors from. I don't know if it's something I could get at a Radio Shack or what. But when I come back to this, I will document the installation of the little circuit protector, and we'll see if it does indeed bring the turntable fully back to life.